Okay, and again, we're going to have a chance to come back to a couple of these things with the next couple of questions. So, Bill, we're going to start with you. We've actually done the full rotation. Let me go ahead and put the question out there. You've talked about a number of different options, all of you have. As a council member, would you advocate getting a sheriff's feasibility study? And if so, what constraints, if any, would you place on it? In other words, would you ask for a feasibility study on the so-called standalone or Cerritos model, where Cerritos basically contracts with the sheriffs to have a standalone sheriff's unit at their city? Or would you look at something more like what some of our partners on the Hill have done relative to basically contracting with the sheriff across the board with those three different cities? So I would be interested to hear your thoughts regarding a sheriff's feasibility study, and if so, what type you might advocate. And Bill, you're up.
Well, I've gone back and forth on whether or not to get a feasibility study. One part of me says, in order to be able to make good informed decisions, you have to have all of the information. And so to do that, it would require a feasibility study. I would look at a standalone, and I would hope that if we did look at this, we would look at ways to protect our own officers. But I think on the other hand, the sheriff wants to charge us, I think it's $100,000 or something like that, or 125. And really, I've done a lot of government procurements, and I've never had a contractor come to me and say, I want to give you a bid for certain services, but I want to get $125,000 from you to do that. So I'm a little up in the air on that one, but I think I lean more towards not doing it.
Okay, and as I've been reminded yet again, I managed to miss one of you. So for the several of you who have written and said, "Gee, Michael, you're doing a great job. You may want to get rid of those." So
you're fired. No.
Yeah, pretty much, right? I'm going to apologize and let you go now, which you actually should have gone first. And then we'll pick it up from there. So the question is around a sheriff's feasibility study.
Who are you asking? Me?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Because had I done it right, you would have gone first and Bill would have gone second.
Okay.
But yeah.
All right. All right. I'll let you make it up. Stay after school. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
I would absolutely ask for that. I think you could renegotiate the cost of getting that sheriff feasibility study. I'm not sure that we need to pay that. I think a lot of times, very much like Bill Sewell mentioned, a lot of times in competing for government contracts, I was not aware that way up front, they're just going to ask for that kind of money. They are going to put some time and effort into it. I did think that we had already had a sheriff study in the past. I'm not sure how comprehensive that study was. I want to say something like 2017. And it didn't sound like it was comprehensive. It didn't sound like we were able to compare apples to apples. But for sure, I would ask for one now, because I think in a lot of ways, the sheriffs are really our backups. For our police, like for instance, the riot control that we had recently, the sheriffs had to come in, or if we have big events or whatever, we are relying on the sheriff in some way. So already we have a blended picture. Again, the dispatch has had, I think, 1 or 2 or maybe 3 lawsuits against them for failure to respond, or it got rerouted to Torrance or something like that. I think we really need to take a look at the dispatch. That's imperative for people's safety and making sure that that our current police can respond immediately, regardless of who's going to be responding. So yes, the answer is yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Jim, you're up next.
Yeah, I am not opposed to getting a sheriff's feasibility study. In fact, I think that, frankly, the police ad hoc is asking them for a bid in any case. I frankly do not expect that it would realize a lot of savings for us unless they were trying to lowball us. The reality is that if we want to keep the same level of service that we have, if we wanted to adopt something like the Cerritos model, about the only thing that we would eliminate is our chief of police. And while that is an expense, if you divide that by the 5,000 households in this city, I think it's one that is quite manageable. I frankly would be very concerned about contracting with the sheriff, regardless of what their bid came back as. And I think the best example of why we should be cautious in that regard is the fire contract that we have. Our contract with the county to provide fire services is now at almost $6 million. In this fiscal year, they increased that contract by 7%. We have no negotiating leverage with the County of Los Angeles. We are a speck of dust out in a corner of the county that they see only as a place where they can solve their own funding problems. And so I would not be supportive of moving to the county sheriff. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Dawn.
Okay. So I get to go last this time. I agree with various pieces that each of the people have said. I agree with Bill that in order to make good decisions, it's important to have information, and residents need to be informed about the alternatives and, you know, what their choices are. It's strange for me to pay for an RFP that, you know, in my line of business, we just didn't pay. I think you asked about what type of an RFP we would put out, were we to put out, right?
Yes.
And so, you know, my experience has been a little bit more, I haven't seen the details of the existing RFP, but in my experience, you define the set of services that you want to receive, right? And you say, I want this level of service and that level of service and these things. And then you turn it out there and you have the vendors or whoever you're getting the bids from tell you what it would cost for them to provide that level of services. You know, I want the roads patrolled 3 times, each street done 3 times a week or something. And then they come back to you with what the costs are rather than constricting how they actually do the work. So, you know, I'm interested in seeing what the vendors come back with with respect to the level of services that the residents want, and that we look at those comparisons, and that helps us understand our cost structure. But for me to pay for it, I'm with Gain. I'd like to see if there's some way to negotiate.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.